Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop preview for the opening night of football season. We're finally back to that time of year where we'll be covering both golf and the NFL over here on the channel. And in this preview, going to go over that Thursday night football matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs, which first off, an absolute firecracker of a matchup out here to open up the season, and one over there from the Showdown and prop side, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to want to deep dive. So this will be coming out early on a Monday, giving you guys a lot of information out here to go ahead and mull over the next few days. And of course, as we get closer to lock, probably even more exposure that we're getting to. But this first look should give you a good sense of what to expect out there on Thursday. So we're going to start it off with the DFS look ahead, take a look at some of the pricing projections out there for Thursday, talk about where some of the chalk is going to come in, perhaps some game scripts to go out there and consider as well. And then afterwards, we'll go through the Underdog and Prize Picks boards and give you 4 props that I've already taken out there for Thursday and how to approach it from the prop perspective. So a little bit of an all-encompassing preview, whether you're over there on Draftkings with Showdown or over there on the prop side, gonna have you covered. Just go ahead, cut the chit chat, go ahead and hop right on in. First off, a look at the DFS side of things. It's been a minute since we've had one of these projection sheets up, but just like last year, going to be covering a lot of the same of what we did there in 2023. So we've got both teams' projections on here. We've got projected points, all this, positional Draftkings price stuff over there as well. But what we're really going to focus on over here are these projections, like I just mentioned, and then the ownership tab over here as well. So we've got projections for every player out here on a Monday, as well as expected large field GPP, which is probably going to change as the week goes on as we see more pieces of content talking about the quote-unquote right place to get to. You're going to see the industry sentiment change a little bit. And after Clyde Edwards-Helaire ended up getting rolled out this morning, you have guys like Hollywood Brown that are doubtful for this week. We've already started to make some adjustments out there to our projections, out there to hopefully who we're going to be looking at out there on Thursday, but that's also going to shift as the week goes on. So just know that this is coming out on Monday. So if you're watching this on Tuesday or Wednesday, there's some late injury news that comes out that we haven't accounted for here. That is why, and also why the Patreon page is a great place to be. But we'll talk about the Patreon later. That is, of course, where you can get these spreadsheets for yourself. But let's start it off with these 2 quarterbacks towards the top end of the board. So we got Lamar Jackson at 11,400, which, believe it or not, is actually a very reasonable price tag compared to where he was for a lot of 2023 for these kind of slates. And then Patty Mahomes is only 10,400, which they're the most expensive players on the slate. That is not that surprising. What's more so surprising is how soft the pricing is out here for Showdown. Normally Lamar would be like 12 grand. I'd say Patrick Mahomes 11 to maybe 11.5 out there for most Showdown contests. And you do have a very deep slate here, so it's not just the top tier quarterbacks, but you've got a lot of playmakers like a Kelsey, Henry that are going to demand a relatively high price tag. And even your tier down from that, guys like a Pacheco, Flowers, Rice, Andrews are all players that are going to get at least like a $7,000, maybe even $8,000 price tag for most slates that they're playing on. But because we have 2 of the best teams out there in the AFC going head to head, the pricing is extremely deep, and just like you'd get for a golf DFS slate, it's going to be extremely soft pricing. So if you wanted to play both of these quarterbacks, you can sneak them into lineups because of how soft things are going to be towards the middle to bottom end of the board. My personal favorite, though, is going to be to take one of these 2 quarterbacks in most of our scripts, as the main thing to keep a look for, especially the main thing to consider out there for large field GPPs, is oftentimes the script that you're building for. And the scripts where both quarterbacks are going to get there are very, very specific, and usually shootout scripts, where you're going to have quarterbacks, receivers, tight ends mixing into a lineup, and probably not a lot of defenses and running backs. So I do think that there are scripts where both of these quarterbacks get there, but personally, I mean, again, it's only a Monday. It could change by the time we get to Wednesday or Thursday, but I'm thinking it's going to be a lot of 1 quarterback kind of lineups and probably not a lot of 0 quarterback lineups. So rather than a lot of 0 or a lot of 2 quarterbacks, I'm probably going to have a lot of 1 or the other sort of builds. Moving down from those 2, and you can see the ownership, by the way, is high on both of those players. In fact, there's only 0.5% ownership difference in terms of their total ownership. So pretty much split splitting hairs at best, trying to choose between, who's the quote-unquote higher or lower end quarterback. Next tier down, though, is a Travis Kelce, and this is where you start to see the ownership on the flex go down a little bit, but he's still holding a lot of captain ownership, which part of that comes down to the fact that he's not a quarterback. He's also a little bit more affordable out there at the captain position, and what you get out there with Showdown is normally the quarterbacks will get some attention out there with captain, but the ones that are more optimal, or at least in terms of like the numbers long term, if you look over a season, a lot of times it's your running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers that have the highest optimal rate, particularly when they're an elite tier option like Travis Kelce. So I think that the community is starting to come along on that. It's starting to play guys like Kelce, Henry, Pacheco, a lot of these guys that we're about to dive into here, as much as these elite tier quarterbacks at the captain spot. Not only are you going to get a little bit of salary savings if you go that direction, but you're also getting the same, if not a higher optimal percentage if you look back at some of that historical data. So part of that is price point. Quarterbacks are normally a little bit more expensive than some of these other players, but it also comes down to ceiling score. And on a site like Draftkings, where we have PPR in play, somebody like Kelce, who can score 2 touchdowns out there with the ceiling day, could get to close to 7 to maybe even 12 receptions on a really good day. Those are the kind of guys that can score 30 to 40 fantasy points. And guys like Lamar, unless he's running in like 2-3 touchdowns, Patrick Mahomes is never really going to sniff a 40 fantasy point kind of day, unless it's like an 80-90 point total. And just the shootout of all shootouts out there. So the guys that I like getting to for captains are normally some of these position players, and somebody like Kelce that has an infinite amount of red zone upside is the kind of player that I'll take at that position. But out here on a Monday, I still think that he's going to get some steam at captain. Maybe it's more the casual fans that want to play Kelce after the whole Taylor Swift thing. I'm sure that there'll be a contingent of them out there that are doing so. I just like more the ceiling potential. We've seen it for Kelce in the past. I've always been a huge proponent for playing him at the captain position and going out there and playing DFS. So when I get to my player pool out there on Tuesday, Wednesday, there's a really good chance that he's one of the first yeses that I put over there on Patreon out there for one of my captains. So of course, guys, all of that is going to be censored for now. In fact, I have not even decided on my player pool here on a Monday. So it's not really like I'm censoring much over there to the right. But as the week goes on, they're going to be posted over there on the Patreon updates and the sort of players that I'm getting to. So we're going to talk about a lot of them now. Right? Like I can tell you for a fact that Kelce will be in my flex pool. It's just a matter of whether I play him at captain, and if I do, which is very likely, how much I'm taking at that sort of spot. Because at 13.5% ownership, I'm going to have to take him in like a quarter of my lineups to get leverage, which is quite the investment out there at the captain position. Top 2 players, Lamar, Patrick, we're going to have to see where the ownership comes in out there with the captain position. But a lot of times, I'll just punt captain with quarterbacks and use that as a piece of leverage against the field. As I mentioned, those position players, those receivers, tight ends, running backs have a very comparable optimal percentage there at captain. So oftentimes, I'll just play the leverage game against those quarterbacks on a slate and play a lot of those position players at captain. And like I said, still Monday, but there's a good chance that I do that out here for Thursday Night Football, particularly with so many casuals out here playing this kind of slate. Next up, we got Derrick Henry, of course, starting bell cow running back out there for the Ravens now. He's got a different, change of scenery out here in 2024, and an O-line that should be just as good, if not an upgrade over his 2023 line, that I think might benefit him quite a bit out here from the fantasy perspective. Not only is he going to be on a team that might block a little bit more efficiently, but he's also on a team that's likely going to score more points. It is going to have more red zone opportunities. And for a power back like Henry that relies on that touchdown upside, I think that is infinitely helpful out there from the DFS perspective. So in general, I think I'm going to try and be higher on him early on the year than I am later in the year, where he might start to slow down a little bit at his advanced age. But at $9,000, he's a great flex option on this sort of slate, especially if you think the Ravens are going to keep this competitive. And maybe you're new to Showdown, maybe you just watched a lot of my golf content and you're not as familiar with how to approach a Showdown slate. But when we talk about game script, it's all about the players that are going to get a boost out there in their usage rate based on the score or the way that a game is going. So, for example, in a game where Baltimore is leading substantially, Derrick Henry is going to see a massive boost in his usage. Players, or teams, I should say, playing from ahead are oftentimes going to rush the ball a lot more than if they were playing from behind, as they want to bleed out the clock and try and end the game as quick as possible. On the flip side, if you're a team that is losing by 2-3 touchdowns, you're going to be doing the opposite of that, going out there trying to press the issue as quick as possible, and knowing that when building lineups or catering your lineups around those kind of scripts is the key to going out there and actually taking down a contest. So Derrick Henry, I think even in a neutral game script, is viable out there for the slate, but in lineups where I think that the Baltimore is going to go out there and be efficient, heck, it might even be with Lamar Jackson up top, right? It's not saying that I only think they're going to go out there and run the ball, but if I think Lamar is going to be efficient, go out there and have maybe even a captain sort of day, it might not even be the worst idea to play a Derrick Henry on top of that, because they're going to be running so much if they go out there and they get that kind of lead. So it's important to consider those kind of scripts, those kind of factors when you're going out there and building your lineups. And I think in rush heavy builds that Derrick Henry gets a massive boost out there in projections, and I will be treating him as such out there when I choose to use him. They've got Pacheco as well, who is playing on the team that is the favorite out here for the first game. So anytime you're playing for the favorite, you're going to get an artificial boost in ownership, which is why you can see I have him slightly higher owned at the captain spot, and the flex ownership is a little bit more significantly different. You can see I've got him about 6% higher owned out there at the flex position, which is nothing crazy. It is significant though, right? That kind of difference between those two players, and it's the same kind of thing with Pacheco. If you think that the Chiefs are going to go out there, take advantage, get that kind of lead, maybe it's Pacheco that gets him the lead, and then he goes out there and gets even more rushing usage afterwards as a byproduct of that. Or maybe it is Mahomes that goes out there, tears up the defense. Maybe it's even Kelsey, right? That's that captain because he goes out there and scores 2 touchdowns. You could have Kelsey captain lineups with, maybe with or without Patrick Mahomes out there in that kind of build as well, that use Pacheco as that, power hammer, that pile driver out there in the second half that's getting those 10 to 15 carries and potentially an extra touchdown out there from his fantasy score. So he's only $8,400. I think that's actually another reason why he's higher owned than Derrick Henry. He's cheaper and he's on the team that is the favorite out there for the first day, which I think is going to lead to more people playing him in GPP. So you've got that out there with Pacheco versus Henry. I think both make plenty of sense depending on the kind of lineup that you're entering. But just like these two quarterbacks, this one isn't so much salary based, but more so the fact that if one guy is going to be getting a huge boost in ownership, or boost in usage, I should say, the other one's probably getting a tick down out there with his usage. So just like those quarterbacks, there's not really a lot of lineups where I'm going to be using those two together, as there's a little bit of anti-correlation out there with the running back position. Next up, you've got these second-year wide receivers out here with Zay Flowers and Rashee Rice. I think that both are going to take a step up this year, which is certainly not a hot take if you've been following the NFL. I think a lot of people are expecting a lot of good things out of Zay Flowers and Rice this year. Both are very affordable. $8,000, $7,600 is probably at least $1,000 too cheap compared to where these guys will probably be in a week out there for their given showdown slate. I can say I've got Rashee Rice just projecting through the roof out there at 17 points. But even Zay Flowers at a very respectable 1.6 points per dollar right there are players that I'm definitely going to be building around. In fact, of these top tier players, I can't imagine that anyone from Zay Flowers up is going to be a fade out there in my player pool. So I'm a 150 maxer. I can, afford to spread out my exposure a little bit up top. Maybe there's going to be guys that I'm overweight on, a little bit underweight compared to their projections in large field GPPs, but I can't imagine that any of these top 6, top 5 guys are going to be players that I'm taking 0% on out there for this given slate. So I think the price tag on Flowers and Rice are more than adequate out there in each case, and especially out here with Rice, who points per dollar is the best play towards the top end of the board. I might see the ownership creep up as the week goes on. If other sites are going to be in agreement with me that he is by far the best receiving option to take, especially when you're comparing it to price, you're going to see optimizers, you're going to see a lot of the other sites start to pump out content with Rashee Rice, which might might make his ownership go from an already high, about 51.2% total ownership, to maybe even closer to like 60 or 60% plus out there in a few contests. So we're going to have to be monitoring that over the next few days. If there's a huge community sentiment that he's one of the best options out there for Thursday, then we're going to have to tinker with the ownership a little bit and distribute it a little bit differently down here in that mid-tier range. We've also got Mark Andrews, who you can see on here is technically questionable at this point. Worth noting, though, that he is expected to be full go out there for Thursday, so I wouldn't be that concerned about that questionable tag. The more concerning things are players that have already been rolled out. So I think Hollywood Brown is still technically down as doubtful, but he's not going to be playing out there on Thursday unless there's some sort of a medical miracle by the time that we get to that kind of game. And we also have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's been rolled out there for Kansas City, which means that Samaje Perine will be running as the third down back and backup out there to Isaiah Pacheco. So you can see we've already got that accounted for out there with Perine. We've also got it accounted for out there with some of the other injuries and other usage things that we've had to tinker with over the last few days. And it's still going to be a learning process. Worth noting that these projections are exactly just that, right? Projections out here this early in the year. As the preseason, those sort of reps are, helpful out there for some of those backups and third stringers, but we really didn't get a good taste for the kind of usage that we're going to see in actuality out there from a lot of these teams. So it's worth noting that these projections, right, are just our best guess for what's going to happen out there on Thursday, but definitely a well-educated guess at that. A lot of the sportsbook lines are incorporated and baked into the projections that I'm using to go out there and use my projections. So they're not blindly done by any means, but early in the year, even the sports books have a lot more unknowns, a lot more uncertainty out there with their projections. So at least worth pointing out here for the Thursday slate. And Mark Andrews, he might play full on out, right? This is why I brought it up at this section of the video, is Mark Andrews, his usage could be 100%, could be, back to, regular good old Mark Andrews, which at this kind of price tag, by the way, $6,400, would be a criminal price tag to have Mark Andrews at, or he might be limited. You might see a little bit more Isaiah Likely. So in this kind of situation, right, I'm not going to act like I have a crystal ball and know what's going to happen. I would say that he's probably going to be close to 100%, but I would imagine still a little bit limited, given that he has that questionable tag. So this is the kind of player that we're going to want to keep an eye on as we get closer to lock. Perhaps get a little bit of a beat reporter action, maybe an update on the injury report to go out there and give us some clarity. But as of right now, I'm expecting him to play, but maybe not to his 100% efficiency, which is why he's only about a 2 points per dollar. Normally, he'd be projecting for closer to 14, maybe even the whole way up to like 15 fantasy points, which would make him, just like a Rashee Rice, one of the best plays out there on the entire slate. Next up, we got Xavier Worthy, also Rashad Bateman. So these would be your wide receiver, quote-unquote, twos out there for each team. Now, Worthy's probably going to be the wide receiver 3 when we get Hollywood Brown back out there for the Chiefs. But both of these players, at least for the first day of Showdown, are very intriguing because of their price tag. They can easily be your third, maybe fourth man in out there into lineups. You can see that Worthy projects a little bit better than Bateman, especially now that you're not going to have Hollywood Brown out there for week number 1. And what I like about Xavier Worthy is the speed. I mean, that jumps off the page based on what we saw at the Combine. What I worry about, though, is the unknowns with usage. So just like Mark Andrews, right? This is another spot where I want to point this out, is we've got him projected for 11 fantasy points, but that's assuming a relatively large target share. Now, I think without Hollywood Brown that he's very likely to get that, at least for week number 1, but weeks 2 and beyond, when we have all those different wide receivers, Kelsey to feed, Noah Gray, backup tight end, right, is still going to get some usage out there as well. It's going to be really tough, I think, to narrow down who's getting the lion's share of targets over here in KC. And if he's going to be mega chalky, you can see right now, I don't have Xavier Worthy as mega chalk at just about 22% combined ownership. If he was going to be chalky, though, I might have to second guess whether I'd be using him in large field contests. But for now, out there without Hollywood Brown, also the fact that he's only $5,800 is probably going to have me squeezing him in as one of those mid-tier riskier options. But again, another player that we want to listen to some of these beat reporters, maybe read between the tea leaves a little bit to figure out what to do with them, as early in the year, there's going to be a lot of unknowns out there with players, and particularly new faces to town like an Xavier Worthy. Rashad Bateman, he's more of a known commodity. You've heard Lamar Jackson say that he thinks that he's going to have a breakout year out here in 2024. So at $5,200, you can see actually doesn't project as well as Xavier Worthy, but out there in my lineups, I feel more comfortable playing Rashad Bateman, and if he's going to be lower owned than Xavier, it's not like I hate Xavier at all, right? I'm still, like I said, likely going to use him in quite a few lineups this week, but Rashad Bateman is a much sneakier play, a lower owned play out there than Worthy, and I think has the same sort of upside out there as him, maybe not the same kind of floor because of the fact that he's in a less efficient offense, also a team that doesn't pass the ball nearly as much as what you have out there with Kansas City. But if he goes out there and scores, gives us one of those long Bateman touchdowns, like we've seen, those 40, 50-yard bombs that he's capable of, that would be huge. That would be massive out there for Showdown. So a lot of times you have to look at a player and think what could happen, not so much what's likely to happen, because you're looking for ceiling potential out there in large field GPPs. You're trying to find the right 6 players that went out there and had that pop performance, not so much, right, who's most likely to go out there and have the best day. If you did, you just want to run projections, run an optimizer, go out there and take those top 6 plays. But when we go out there and you take a look at who actually takes down these contests, it's always very correlated. A lot of times there's that random guy in there that you weren't expecting out there in those top 6 players, and you've got to know that when you're going out there and building lineups. So like I said, Bateman, maybe not the best points per dollar play. You can see here just 1.4x out there with his points per dollar, but still is going to fit some of the narratives that we're looking for, and in particularly maybe lineups where we're taking more Kansas City heavy players, assuming that they're going to take the lead. If the Ravens are behind and have to force the ball down the field a little bit more, Bateman would see a huge usage increase, and also could project a little bit better as he's seeing deeper targets down the field. You've got these kickers up next. So you've got Justin Tucker, Harrison Butker at $5,000 and $4,600 respectively. Both project pretty average, maybe even a little bit above average when it comes to their points per dollar. So I think that both are decent filler options in the mid-tier range, but are more just guys that you mix in, you maybe match the field, go a little bit over the field on if you're a 150 maxer, and in very rare cases are you going to go out there and get leverage on a kicker. So that's what I'll say about them. I usually mix them into my player pool. They're usually never spots that I'm using as a huge piece of leverage out there on this kind of slate. But no one, at least, especially if the weather's good, right? As of right now, I think it's a little bit too early to take a look at the weather forecast. But if we're not going to have a windy night over there in Kansas City, for all accounts, these two are probably just fine to go out there and deploy. You've got these defenses. I guess Justice Hill, right? He's backup out there for Baltimore. He could vulture a touchdown or something like that at $4,400. So definitely not out of play out there at that kind of price tag. But $4,400 for somebody that's likely projecting for 5, maybe 6 carries is a little bit of a tough scene, and you can see that reflected with his ownership. But as I was kind of getting ahead of myself there with these defenses down here at $4,000 and $3,600 respectively, are also filler options, just like these kickers that you could get to, but even more so than the kickers. Kickers you can consider scripts on occasionally, I guess, assuming that maybe the red zone efficiency isn't as good as what you'd hope for, and that's why they're kicking a little bit more out there with each team. But these defenses can be extremely correlated out there to the rest of your lineup. So for example, if you're going to play a Ravens lineup, and just for full transparency, I probably won't use a kicker at captain. I probably won't use one of these defenses at captain. Could they get there? Yes, but I'm usually not a big proponent for that unless you have two offenses that are very turnover prone. And given that it's Lamar versus Patrick Mahomes, I wouldn't say that that's the case. But what I like about these two defenses is more so the filler option at flex. If you're going to have a Ravens defense or a Chiefs defense out there in lineups, it doesn't mean that 100% that you're going to be out there the dominant team that's out there and winning. But if you're going to score defensive touchdown, if you're going to force 3, maybe even 4 turnovers to get the kind of points you'd need for a defense to be optimal, it could only be like 2-3 turnovers and then some sacks that gets you there as well. Either way, you probably want the running back from that team included too. Just like the playing from ahead script would benefit running backs, same thing with defenses, right? If the defense is going to help you get that big lead, playing running backs and using that correlation is usually a pretty good idea from the game script idea or perspective as well. So both of these I think are appropriately priced. They're cheap enough to where you could use them for some salary savings, and depending on the script that you're going with, especially with some of your spend ups, could make sense from that perspective as well. We've got some cheaper wide receivers down here now, so these would be like your wide receiver 3, maybe even 4 out there on their respective team. But Aguilar does have a little bit of deep play threat going, especially with the fact that that Baltimore offense isn't very deep at that wide receiver position. So he'll probably see a good snap share, you'd imagine. A lot of that is up in the air because it's early in the year, but I do think has some upside out there in large field GPPs. Justin Watson, a lot of the same. Both of them, by the way, are about 10% or lower ownership, which is going to make them decent leverage spots if you choose to go this far down the board. Obviously, the price tags are giving you some flexibility towards the middle to top end of the board. And Justin Watson, he's a very big-bodied wide receiver, tends to make a lot of big plays when he actually gets targeted. So he's the kind of guy in large field GPPs that certainly has upside like an Aguilar. And in terms of your cheaper options, these are my favorite kind of plays. Guys that we know are actually going to see snaps, that have upside when they go out there and get snaps, and the kind of guys I'd be including out there in some of my lineups. Before we talk about the complete bottom end guys, some of those dumpster diver plays of the week, I want to remind you guys about where you can find the spreadsheet and everything that you see on here. So obviously as the week goes on, we're going to have the projected points updating. This ownership's going to change a lot by the time we get out there to Wednesday and Thursday. For all of that, as the week goes on, make sure to check out the Patreon. There's a link in the description of the video to go out there and find that. You can download these spreadsheets, and everything on there will be uncensored. So that will include my entire player pool out there, 150 maxes, and it'll include my scripts out there for each player. And you can see over here, there's an if so why. I give you exactly how I plan on using each player. So if I'm using a quarterback, how many receivers, tight ends am I stacking him with? Am I using him with his running back from the same team? All of that sort of stuff. With a wide receiver, am I using him at captain? Am I forcing in a quarterback to pair with him? My defenses, am I forcing in a running back out there with that kind of correlation? All of those sort of things that you've probably been wondering about. A lot of tout sites out there, right, will go out there, just give you a player pool and just hope you can figure it out for Showdown. Showdown is a lot more nuanced than that. There's a lot more going on out there with the Showdown slate, and rather than assuming that you can just figure it out yourself, I go out there and I make it as clear as humanly possible. As I said, not only just giving you my projections, player pool, projected points out there for every single player, but truly giving you that deep perspective into why and how I am using every single player, which doesn't have to be exactly the kind of exposure that you're getting to, but it can help guide what you're doing and help make your process a lot more detailed and give you some insight into what a pro player is doing. So make sure to check that out. We also have the core play tab over there. So whether I'm not just using them in large field GPPs, because over here, this flex and captain pool, what's posted over there is like my 150 max exposure, but I enter single entries too, right? I have core plays that I'll only use in some of my mid to higher dollar entries, and I also give that over there as well. So if you've been wondering where to get all of those projections, that is exactly where you can. But for the bottom end of the board, there's not a ton down here that I like, but maybe one player that we should really focus on. And that one player is at the top end of this range, and it is the $3,000 Samaje Perine. I've got his ownership at about 15.5%. Also, his projected points only at about 5.5. But if we get word from the beat reporter that he's actually going to see playing time with Clyde Edwards-Helaire out, his projection could be closer to 7, maybe even 8 points by the time that we get to lock. That'd be on the high end for sure, but his projected points, if that were to happen, or his projected ownership, I should say, would be like 25 to maybe even 30%. So he's the kind of guy that could get a lot of late steam because of that CEH news, and a lot of your sites out there for fantasy haven't even accounted for it quite yet. So obviously we have over there on the Patreon page and out here with this content, but somebody to keep an eye on out there with that ownership steam, and that I think makes plenty of sense. I mean, as the backup for Kansas City, is going to be playing a lot of the third down roles out there with Pacheco, as he can catch the ball out of the backfield, but he's not as good of a blocker as somebody like Perine likely is, and also not as good as catching those screens, and a little bit more agile, I'd say, than Pacheco. And Pacheco's a little bit more powerful for sure. That's why he's the main first and second down back. But Perine, it would blow my mind if he didn't see at least like a 10% snap share out there as the backup running back. So he would be the main guy down low. Isaiah Likely, if Mark Andrews is going to be a little bit limited and you want to play a script where maybe he's a little bit more limited than people think, Isaiah likely would be the main beneficiary of that. So if you're taking a stand against Mark Andrews in that kind of lineup, you'd probably want to include a likely as the guy that's taking up that snap share. Guys like Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman, I have a hard time projecting. I would say, if anything, Hardman I'd like a little bit more than Sky Moore, just because I think that Hardman's going to play more with his familiarity with the offense. Both of these, or even one of these two, could be inactive by the time that we get to Thursday, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Noah Gray at $1,600 seemingly has like 4 games every single year where he gets there as a super cheap tight end, and these backup tight ends are always going to be a thing. So even if Mark Andrews was 100%, we'd probably still have to consider likely a little bit, just as we're looking at Noah Gray down here at $1,600. Getting a little bit of ownership, you can see down there at 7.5%, but if you threw him into 10 to 15% just in case, it's giving you a whole lot of salary savings at that kind of price tag. Tylan Wallace, probably not using. Deontay Hardy, same thing, I'm probably not using. These would be pure GPP flyers, 150 max flyers at best. Charlie Kolar, I think he's the 3rd string tight end out there for Baltimore. He's more of a blocker anyways. Last year did get there on 1 game, so can't completely roll him out, but he's $600 and more of a GPP flyer than anything. And then Patrick Ricard actually projecting a little bit better than some of these other guys, but also a GPP flyer, might get there once, twice, maybe 3 times out there on a really good year. And then Jared Wiley is essentially a non-factor. So this is the slate out there for Thursday. It's the first one of many to come here on the channel. And now let's take a look over there at the prop side of things. And now for our prop side. So we're going to start with Underdog, go through 2 props that I like over here, and then 2 props that I like on the prize pick side as well. And out here for Thursday Night Football, first thing I want to say right off the bat with props is that a lot of these are going to be juiced up, and you're especially going to see that over there on prize picks with the 2 unders that we're taking on that side. But even on the Underdog board, some of these lines are higher than where they have them at over there in sports books, and it makes sense with how much casual money is going to come in on this first game. Not only is it an insane matchup, there's more casual money on those games to begin with, but it's literally the first game of the year. So just like the Super Bowl, maybe not as much as the Super Bowl, but you're going to see a lot of people watching this Thursday night game, and the result of that is going to be a lot of just entertainment money coming in on these boards. So to take advantage of that, they can juice up some of these props and know that people are still going to take people's overs on rushing yards. They're still going to take like overs on touchdowns out there for players, even if it's not the best value compared to sports books. So I think a prime example of this would be like an Isaiah Pacheco receiving in rushing touchdown, essentially an anytime touchdown prop out there for Isaiah Pacheco, and where I took the under on it. If you look at some of the sports books, he'll be around even money, maybe even like a plus 105, plus 110 out there to go and score a touchdown. I believe Draftkings had him at minus 105. I think that was the worst odds that you could find out there for Pacheco to score. But any books that have the no function, so the ability to take somebody not to score a touchdown, or the minus 160 to even minus 180 range out there for no, which if you're looking for a plus EV prop, that's getting as close as you can to about a 60% hit rate. And with this 0.5 prop over there on prize picks, he's actually a demon prop out there towards the over. So if you took him for an over there in prize picks, you can actually get a boosted payout. But you can take the opposite side, which again, on books where you can take no, is at least like minus 160, at least minus 150, minus 160 odds out there towards the no side, for even money, right? Without any sort of multiplier on it. So that's why I bet against him. He's an absolute beast. Kansas City gets down into the red zone, you're going to be sweating this one out, unlike anything else out there. But if you take a look at the game log, he only had 7 games last year in the regular season where he actually got into the end zone. So there's a case to be made to go out there and bet against somebody like an Isaiah Pacheco, which is why I'm going out there and taking his under for week 1. Zay Flowers, on the other hand, is not a plus EV prop like we have with this first option, but rather a player that I like based on traditional analysis. And what I like about this matchup is that first off, you've got a very close game script, whether you want to, give it to Kansas City or the Ravens out there, should be close for all things considered. Zay Flowers, too, is coming off of his rookie year, and last year he covered this in over 50% of his games, but more importantly, in one-score games, he covered this in over 70% of his starts. So when the games are close, when the Ravens are forced to go out there and pass, Zay Flowers is getting a lot of those targets. And while it's a different year, different setup out there with the receiver core, he's your clear number one now. You still have Mark Andrews out there, but it's Rashad Bateman out there at number two, who was out there last year. If anything, I think Zay Flowers is going to see a larger target share this year, if not about the same to what he had in 2023. And as I said, he went over this in over 50% of his games anyways. You get the closer game scripts, you get some of the better teams that he was matched up against, and you see that hit rate just click up and up a little bit. And a lot of that's just game script based, going out there and having to pass the ball, because if the Ravens were ahead, if they could just choose to go out there and run it 40 times a game, I'm sure they would. Right? They let Lamar go out there for 10, 12 rushes. They let, Derrick Henry, maybe Justice Hill go out there for 30 combined carries every single time if they can. The unfortunate part is they're not always playing from ahead. They did not have a perfect record last year in a game like this against the defending champs, Kansas City at home. It could be one of those games that they're playing from behind. So if that's the case, I love that out there for Zay Flowers at 4.5 receptions, which again, this is not a plus EV prop. Maybe we do see it start to get juiced towards the over as the week goes on. Now, that is certainly possible, right? As myself, I've seen other sharps in the community also taking a look at the Zay Flowers over, but this Pacheco one is definitely going to be some value. CEH being out might slightly boost up Pacheco's touchdown rate, but it's not like they won't use Samaje down there in the red zone, particularly if it's going to be on a third down. That maybe takes away from his receiving threat, as Samaje is one of the best receiving running backs in the NFL. So even if he does get a slight boost without CEH, I think that kind of gets taken away from the receiving aspect, which is why I really like that prop. And then over here on Prize Picks, it doesn't look like we have the board up here, which they've been giving me some issues on here. So you can see them on here, though. It is a Mark Andrews under on receiving yards, and then an Xavier Worthy under on 47.5. For whatever reason, they've been giving me some issues over here with showing the board, but those are the two props that I wanted to take. And the reason for it is whether you compare them to Underdog or over there in other sites, that they're value comparatively. And it is definitely a little bit annoying that I can't show you over there on this side, but I'll show you what their lines are over here on Underdog and how they're lower. So he's at 48.5, Mark Andrews, that is, over here on Underdog. On Draftkings and other sports books, he's at 47.5 yards. So the fact that he's at 50.5 on Draftkings, or I should say in Prize Picks, sorry, is why we're taking the under, right? There's a 3-yard value compared to the books, a 2-yard value compared to Underdog. And then we go down here to Xavier Worthy. He's at 44.5 yards over here in Underdog. He's actually at the same number over there on sites like Draftkings and FanDuel. And he's at 47.5, so a whole 3 yards higher over there on the Prize Picks side. So I took both of those unders out there for a 3x payout. And just like I said when we first got to this prop section before, I think that they're juicing up some of the lines because of the expected casual money that they're going to see coming in. And we don't have to bet like the casuals are going to, that are going to go out there, try and take, especially like the shiny new toy and Xavier Worthy, go out there and take like an over on yards. Heck, even somebody like a Mark Andrews returning from injury, right? Going out there, supporting their boy, especially some of your Baltimore fans out there. We can play against that, right? We can know that these sportsbooks are going to be juicing up the lines a little bit and try and take a stand against that. So I think some of the better ways to do that would be to go out there, compare their lines out there on sports books, and then you consider the matchup as well, where with Mark Andrews, he's dealing with a very athletic set of linebackers out there with Kansas City, which hasn't shut down tight ends in the past, but has been a tricky matchup out there for some. Also could be limited out there returning from injury, right? He's still questionable out there on the injury report. And then out there with Xavier Worthy, he's a new guy. We have no idea how much he's going to play. Early projections certainly like him. That's why he's up there at 44.5 yards in books, 47.5 over there on Prize Picks. But at the same time, it could be a little bit of an overreaction. You've still got Kelsey in the mix. You still have Rashee Rice, who's going to be your number one wide receiver. You still got a team who's going to run the ball out there with Isaiah Pacheco. There just might not be enough yards, enough usage to go around to get him to the 50 yards. He's going to need to go over that sort of line. So yeah, it's not going to load over here. Like I said, they've been giving me issues when I've been screen recording, especially when I've been doing streams for some reason over there on Prize Picks. But go ahead, take those two unders. Again, it's an under on Mark Andrews at 50.5 yards, also an under on Xavier Worthy at 47.5 that I think are both decent values compared to the books. And with the sort of boards, the sort of pricing that we're getting out there for the week one, is I think the right side to play for a lot of plays, not just what we have with those two. And just like we had over there with the DFS side, guys, if you want all the prop exposure that I'm taking throughout the year, whether it's for the Showdown slates or for main slate every single week, where we're going to have a whole lot more props that we're taking out there for the full set of games, make sure to check out the Patreon page for that as well. The DFS tier will give you guys everything out there for Showdown and for main slate. So on top of the Showdown stuff, I will be doing main slate content out there for every single week out there with the big like 10 to 13 game slates that we get. And of course, over there on the prop side of things, the prop tier is going to give you everything on Underdog and Prize Picks. So I'll also be entering quite a few props over there on the books, as Hard Rock Bet is live down here in Florida, and oftentimes they have even better lines on some of these player props than what we have on some of the other sites. So I'll be mixing in some exposure over there, and of course these Underdog and Prize Picks picks that I just showed you guys. So make sure to check it out. Check out the Patreon in the link in the description of the video to go ahead and find all of that content. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the Thursday night football preview. Our first one of the year should be an absolute banger out there between the Ravens and the Chiefs. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also comment down below who you've got winning this game and by how many points. And if you can get it exactly correct, you will win a free month of my Patreon page. So you can go down here, give me your best guess down below, and once a team and score is taken once, it cannot be taken again. So go ahead, give me the winner and by how many points, and if you end up getting it correct, you will win that free month of the Patreon. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck with any exposure that you're getting to. Patreon page is in the link of the video, like I said before. On there, you can get all the content that you saw censored out there, all the different props that we're getting to out there for Thursday and going forward. And maybe we have a really good year. Also worth noting, we are doing a fantasy football league this year out there with the community. So if you're looking to join that sort of thing, just hit me up on Twitter and I'll let you guys know all the details. And it'll be on Sleeper. It's going to be a $100 buy-in. It will be a PPR league. All the payouts will be done through League Safe, so it'll be regulated through that, right? Take care of anyone's concerns when it comes to the payouts with that. And we'll be live streaming out there with the live stream. You don't have to be on the live yourself. You just got to be out there able to draft. I'll be live streaming my perspective out there from it. And we'll be talking shit the entire year there as well. So on top of the Patreon page launching, on top of getting back to football, that being a great thing, I was going to have that community aspect going on over the next day or so. So that draft, by the way, will either be Tuesday night, so tomorrow night, or over there on Wednesday night. So if you have any thoughts, any questions about it, or any interest in joining the Fantasy League, just make sure to hit me up ASAP. So you can tweet me out there on X/Twitter if you'd like to. DMing is probably the best way. My DMs are open over there on that side. Just let me know and we'll chat about what you have to do to go out there and get in. So best of luck, as I said before, guys. I appreciate your support here on the channel. Let's go out there, have ourselves a season with football, and maybe this Thursday night football slate go out there and treat us nicely as well.